Hoi! There are a couple of New World Halloween event guides around by now, but unfortunately they're missing two crucial things that are very important for both the progression of the event as well as the benefits that you're getting from the events. So I want to make a comprehensive guide here for the Halloween event, but especially talk about those two things as well. We're going to quickly start with the basics for those of you who are not familiar, and then we go into the more important details that some of you may not know. So first of all, when you first start out with the event, you can go into any city. You will find an NPC somewhere in the middle of town near a cauldron that you can talk to, and here you can start a quest. You want to initially pick up this quest because it'll allow you to progress with the rewards, and you will see that once you get into the shop, there is actually a reputation bar at the top, but you don't really need to farm reputation for this event. You just need to do one quest and then you'll be at maxed out reputation and you can just buy everything. In order to complete the quest, we need to defeat the world boss once. The world boss is very easy to find. You can look at your map and you will see certain locations with this little head of the enemy that you're fighting, Balfasu, and if you hover over them it'll say Balfasu's Rising. They're mostly in the northern area of the map. You get them in Morningdale, Weaver's Fen, Brightwood, Ebonscale. That's where they often pop up and are usually easiest to get to. And they can pop up in various locations in these areas as well. If you're looking for groups for this event, then you want to check your recruitment chat. Here you'll see something like X event or the specific location of the event or X Halloween or whatever your server chooses to describe it as. But usually it'll be pretty self-explanatory. If you want to join up for that, you can write X in the chat as well. And you will probably, hopefully, get an invite. The boss fight itself is pretty straightforward. I don't really need to explain much here. You just need to kill a big boss that does a few AoE abilities. One thing that is noteworthy specifically is that there are little pumpkin ads that you can loot after you killed them, and you pick up a pumpkin that you can then throw at the boss for pretty significant damage and also stamina damage, which is relevant because when the stamina of the boss is broken, the boss will take significantly more damage for quite a while. You can sometimes get the stamina broken once and get the boss killed before he even gets back up. So for that, these pumpkins are very, very useful. But otherwise, you can also just brute force the boss with raw damage. It mostly depends on how many other players are participating in the event. I would generally recommend doing the event right now, as people are still doing it more often, because the later into the event you get, the harder it will be to find people for the boss and the longer the boss will take. After you defeated the boss once, you can return to any town and you can drop Balfasu's Ichor, which you got from the boss, in the Night Vale Cauldron, and that will allow you to complete the quest, at which point you can buy all of the rewards. Now, what you're getting from the boss is not just this Ichor, and we're going to talk about this first before we get to the shop rewards, because what you're getting is actually pretty important for what you want to do next. Before we get to that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you're new to the channel, and if you'd like to support me further and get early trading tips, you can do so on my Patreon. So from your boss skills, you get these costumes that will end up in your utilities, and those can be used to pick up candy in towns. You want to put on a costume first, so in order to do that, you can either put it in an equip slot and then use it, or you just click use here, and I'll convert you, give you a costume, and at that point you are able to pick up these treat baskets in town. There are a few in every town, so you need to walk around a little bit to find them, but they are very useful because they give you candy. And candy is probably one of the most important resources of this event, and many people don't seem to be aware of that because there are two candies that are basically just gimmicks, but that doesn't mean that all of them are just gimmicks. You can find these baskets in every town, so you can kind of go through all of the towns and pick up a bunch at once the first time you put on a costume, and then you don't have to worry about them for quite a while. So that's what I would recommend doing. Just do like a 20-minute run through a couple towns, and you should be all set for the majority of the event at least. So there are 4 types of candy. We have the corrupted jelly beans and the angry earth candy fish, which are fun ones that you can just try out for yourself. They're a little bit of a gimmick more than anything. But the two that actually matter for us are the other ones, being Ancient Grizzly Gummies, first of all, and also the Lost Black Licorice. The Ancient Grizzly Gummies give you a buff, and this buff says you are craving for the Night Veil tokens. What this effectively means is if you consume these, you will get double Night Veil tokens for the next 5 minutes. And that is quite useful for one thing specifically, because most things surrounding the event don't really give that many tokens. Usually it's just 1 token, so it doesn't really affect that, but it affects opening the Night Veil crates that you get for handing in the Ichor from the boss. So as you can see, when I normally open these crates, you get somewhere below 10-ish tokens, whereas when you are opening them with these gummies, then it's closer to 20. And this works all the time. There's no chance here that's attached to anything. This is just something that the moment you use these, you get doubled rewards. And it doesn't matter how many of these caches you open at once. So you could stockpile 20 of them and open them all in a row after using 1 gummy, and you'd get the double Night Veil rewards. That already is very useful because it basically means you have to do half as many of the bosses in order to get enough tokens to buy everything you want. But also, on top of that, there is the possibility to get an additional reward from these caches, but that's only 3 times per day. And that's the reason why I say you should stockpile a few of these. So if you only open 3 caches after using the Ancient Grizzly Gummies, then you can get the additional gold cache from that 3 times a day. And sometimes that can be quite rewarding. Sometimes the single cache can give you like 200 gold. Sometimes it's just under 100, but generally it's worth getting these, especially if you're relatively low on gold still. So I would recommend spacing out opening the caches for most players, unless you just have an absolutely excess amount that there's no reason to keep as many. Or of course, if you're close to running out of Ancient Grizzly Gummies and you don't want to collect any more treat baskets. We'll get back to the candy in a bit, but let's first talk about the shop rewards. There are some rewards that you always want to buy. The first one are the chromatic seals. These have a 3-day cooldown. You want to get as many of these as you can during the event, because normally they are way more expensive. Usually they're 5,000 gold and a bunch of faction tokens. Here you can get them for 10 of the tokens, which is very, very easy to get. You can get all of these skins and effects. If you've already played in previous years, you will have most of this, or all of this rather, unlocked already though. And then in addition, there are the patterns. You have the 700 gear score patterns, the legendary ones, which will also have a 3-day cooldown after buying them. I think particularly the weapon ones are worth it, because even if you're not planning to use the weapons, you will be able to utilize this to level weaponsmithing or whichever profession you want to level very easily later on with a little bit of the older cooldown materials. At the moment, that's way too expensive while the event is going on, but you can keep the patterns until after the event, and eventually the prices will probably drop down. The armor pattern, however, is only available to craft if you have 205 armoring skill. So you have to consider for yourself if you even want to level your armoring that high, if this is something you care for at all in the first place, when the gear that you need to craft from or that you get from it is also requiring prismatics. So for most people, I think this is not really going to be worth it. Up to you, depending on what you're after. And likewise, the normal patterns here, the purple patterns, are only available after having 150 crafting of the respective skill. So you will have to level your trade skills quite a bit to make use of these as well. They can be sold, they come with some locked perks, so they're not entirely useless in that regard, but they may not be the right thing for you if you're just a new player starting out or if your focus isn't crafting. As an example here on New World Database, we can look at the blunderbuss recipe, and if we check the pattern here, you need actually high tier materials to actually get a high gear score. So you will need prismatics to get the highest gear score possible, and that's not even 725, that's just 700. And then you will also get a locked flame attunement perk on there, and this flame attunement perk is consistent across pretty much all of these weapons here. So if you really want flame attunement on your weapon, this can be useful, but otherwise it's probably not something you will particularly care about. On the armor equivalent, we can see the same thing. You can choose any armor weight or anything. People will like them for the looks, but the resources required, again, pretty expensive if you're going for the highest tier. And what you're getting as a reward is something with health locked. On either of these, you can lock an additional perk, so you can use a craft mod, which means you could, for example, get 700 gear score with health and enchanted ward, or health and freedom locked, and the third perk would be random. That is still a cheaper high-tier craft than having to use any seals or anything for it, so it's not bad. It's just that for many players, I think the new goal is 725 and not 700 gear, so it depends on how much you value health as a perk. If you have any spare tokens by the end of the event, I would definitely recommend getting those patterns though. But there is the other candy that we haven't talked about, which is Lost Black Licorice. This actually has two different versions. We also need to look at New World Database here. So this is the first version. If you get this, you're unlucky. It's relatively rare to get it, but somehow you can apparently still get it. It's still listed in the trading post as well. This one just gives you nothing. This is the bad effect, and it just doesn't give you any sort of benefit of any degree. But the other Lost Black Licorice is much different. So this gives you the effect Lingering Licorice, and this gives you a massive amount of buffs at once. But keep in mind, all of these buffs are just for 5 minutes. So you have a higher chance to get rare items from chests and monsters. You have a 2% extra item chance with various refining trade skills, or with all refining trade skills. And you have 20% extra gathering luck for all gathering skills. Very interesting, especially if you're crafting expensive materials, cooler materials, and so on. This extra chance used to be very highly valued. People used to pay a lot of gold for this. Now I feel like it's going to be a little less so, because at this point the value isn't as high yet, because there aren't as many people crafting cooler materials, but it's still going to be useful. As you can see here, these used to go for hundreds of golds at some point in the past, and now they're selling for 16 gold. So not that expensive to come by. Can be useful to just buy a couple as well for this purpose, if you're interested in crafting something or using them for luck. Keep in mind the duration is only 5 minutes. So if you're planning to craft something after this, then you better have your materials prepared already and you're just ready to go in that very moment. I hope this gives you a good overview of what to do in the event. If you want to know more about the problems with the event, or about how to approach the event as a lower level player, then I will link another video to you right here that I made about that already. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And if you'd like to support me further, you can do so on Patreon and get early trading tips in return. Thanks to all of my patrons who I do exactly that. And thank you for watching. Yggslath, out.